Brilliant. Well, welcome everyone to our FBS Chat, and today we have Eve Lipchik with us, who we are honoured and so pleased to have, and Gil, one of our mentors, lovely guy who is joining me as my co-host. Eve, normally when I start these conversations with solution-focused practitioners, I ask them how they came across the approach. But you're slightly different in that you're one of the developers of this approach. So it's a kind of that question doesn't really cut it anymore. So
Well, also, Eve, you've written a lot about the early days of solution-focused therapy.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
And how it evolved. I mean, you're one of the few who've really written about that, and I, for one, find that very fascinating, very interesting.
Yeah, cannot wait to hear about those early days. And also, Eve, a little bit more about you, and because I know from what I've read that you studied to be a kind of English and playwright at the start. How did you end up in sort of kind of systemic therapy and working with families?
Oh, that's a long story. It's just, it's one of my adolescent dreams was to write plays for television and radio, and then I got married, and my husband and I lived overseas a few years, and when before I got married, I worked at NBC Television in New York and in an advertising agency. Then I got married, left for Europe. When I came back, I had a child. 4 years had passed, and the television industry was not the right place for me to be. So I was a housewife and mother for many years. And when my children when the youngest of my children was 5, I decided to think about what to do with the rest of my life other than take them back and forth to school. And a neighbor of mine was involved in a research project. I was living in the city of Rochester, New York at the time. And my neighbor was in this primary mental health project, it was called, and it was a research project that took women who had no background in teaching or mental health or of any kind, and trained them to do play therapy with children in the school system. Because the reason for that being that there had been a previous pilot study that showed that between kindergarten and 7th grade, a lot of at least 10% of the children developed emotional problems. And there was not enough professional help in the school system to deal with those children to prevent this. So the University of Rochester, which had a great psychology department, developed this program. I tried this program sort of reluctantly because I wanted to get away from children rather than work with them. And to my surprise, I fell in love with the work. And within 3 months, I was registered at the university for a master's degree, which I studied for at the same time that I continued in that project for the next 4 years there. That's how I got into therapy, thinking therapy.
Brilliant.
And your master's degree was in what?
My master's degree is in social work, clinical social work.
Yeah.
I had a master's degree in Rochester in human services, which when I came to Milwaukee, I switched over to social work because a human services degree is very valuable.
Right.
Yeah. And then when I finished that degree, I had a major in family therapy, but and actually had a job offer. But I took I took the summer to do some clinical work at Family Service of Milwaukee. And Insu happened to be my supervisor in a program, a 2-year program, full-time, sort of an internship, 5 days a week, in which they developed family therapists. And I tried that program for the summer, and there too, within a couple of weeks, I signed on to that program. And since I was fortunate that I didn't have to work, because my husband was able to support us, I was able to take that training. And then Insu and Steve were at Family Service, and by the time I graduated from that program, they were starting the Brief Family Therapy Center. So there I was at the beginning of the Brief Family Therapy Center.
Wow. What was it like having Insu as a supervisor, as a mentor?
Well, I mean, she wasn't the famous Insu. She was just another social worker at Family Service. It was very good. I mean, she was very helpful. The only problem is I used to say to her, would you please tell me what's wrong with what I'm doing and only tell me what's right with it. I really needed some information about what I could do better. And that wasn't in her book of how to teach.
Mm. Emma's just joined us. Can you hear us, Emma?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, Emma is from New Zealand, Steve.
Hi, Emma.
Hi.
And we could have had a whole host of people that wanted to chat to you. So Emma's joining us from New Zealand. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you for the honour. It's a huge honour to be part of this.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to meet all of you.
So in the when it went from the family centre, I know there was, because I've read one of your papers someone sent to me, the development of my personal solution-focused working model from 1978 and continuing. Fascinating, lovely read. Those early days when Insu and Steve had that house and you guys got together and you sat on the stairs and someone was filming. I mean, what was that like? It must have been amazing.
Oh, it was, you know, now in retrospect, it's amazing. But at the time, it was just, we were all really, really turned on to what we were doing. This was different and we had big hopes for it. But it was, you know, it was just, we were so used to working from behind the mirror anyway at Family Service that this was just another way of observing something. We really didn't think at any point that this would go any place. I mean, especially not at the point where we were going to Stephen Insu's house. In 1978, 1979, I think, Steve rented an office. Insu stayed longer because they had to make a living. When BFTC was opened, nobody was able to make a living. So she stayed at Family Service and came over whenever she had some free time. And we opened that office there. And it was, we didn't have many clients. We had to beat the bushes for clients, those of us who could. And you probably read about how we began to have a mirror. We had divided the room, and we eventually put a mirror in. At first, we didn't have a mirror. We just had the people sitting sort of behind the wall there where there was an opening. And then when we put the mirror in, we really saw the people behind the mirror and the clients as a very separate system. It was very much like the Milan team. Certainly we had models at the time for this kind of thing. The Milan team being the most, Palazzoli's Milan team being the model. And so one day when the people behind the mirror said, could we hear what the people, when you guys meet outside, could we hear what you say, what you can't come up with? That had never occurred to us, because it only occurred to us that the interviewing therapist would go back with a message. And it was sort of that they wanted more information than that message was sort of strange. And it got us thinking, well, maybe we should see anything that we did. If it worked, we said, let's do it again. Let's do more of it. Everything was an opening for inquiry and an exciting thing to try. So, okay, so we started to give messages, and giving messages led to, with the tasks, maybe we should talk about how we should give them the tasks rather than just saying, come back next week. It was sort of a slow experimental thing. And eventually it led to this, and in the midst of all this, we're reading all this theory, all this latest theory that's coming out all over the place. And thinking about it, talking about it, seeing how it fits what we do, how it could inform what we do. And eventually, we began to recognize that the people behind the mirror and the people and the person, the interviewing therapist in front of the mirror with the family were not separate systems. The family and the therapy system are not separate systems. I mean, this was a very revolutionary discovery when we made that. It's like, oh, well, we really are one system, aren't we? Because the interviewing therapist would come into the back and talk to the team and go back. But gradually, the interviewing therapist began to give input. At first, it was always the therapist would come back and they'd be handed a message that had been composed, and they'd go back and read it. And then it would happen that the interviewer would say, well, I don't agree with that. I think maybe we should say this or that. So suddenly this became a little bit more enmeshed. And then eventually it got to the point where I started to say, the interview is an intervention in itself. And that was, no, that's not so. And I had to, convince them gradually. So, it was very interesting.
Let me ask you, how in the beginning, how much were you guys influenced by the MRI approach from Palo Alto?
Very much so. Except, of course, the MRI approach never got to this systemic, to seeing the system as a whole. They didn't have an ecosystemic approach. That was our development. But otherwise, very much influenced. Heavens, yes. Steve,
So what, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm saying everything we did was very strategic. Our interventions were very strategic.
In the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. So at what point did the light bulbs go off for you guys and you realized, my gosh, we got something really unique and special here. That's yours.
Well, as we were developing this brief family therapy approach before we became solution focused, Steve published this little newspaper called The Underground Railroad. It was just like 4 typed pages, and he sent it out to a lot of therapists of like mind who were experimenting, Harry Galushian and Harleen Anderson, and some people in Canada, Carl Tom, for example. So he would send these things out to people who were also of like mind. And gradually, these people began to read our Underground Railroad and say, can we come and sit behind your mirror? And of course they could. So people started to come and visit and sit behind the mirror and watch what we were doing. And that was very exciting.
Oh, I bet.
Very exciting. We learned from them, they learned from us, and eventually people from overseas came, but that was after we became solution focused.
So at what point did you say we're now solution focused?
Well, this is my story, and I don't know whether everybody agreed with it, but I just remember very clearly what happened in the viewing room that day. There were a few of us. There always were 2 or 3 of us. Rarely was there one. And we had developed at this point in our brief family therapy, where we had developed some homework assignments that were sort of standard. And the first one was always to ask people to come back and say, what do you want to change? And one of us, and it can't be established which one of us it was, and it doesn't really matter, said, and this was typical, we always were looking for another way to try. Somebody said, why are we always asking them what they want to change? Why don't we ask them what they don't want to change once? And that was it. Came back and we said, oh, that's strange. And we did it again, and then we did it again, and that's it.
It's amazing how that one change of a question seemed to change the whole way that you were going to work that way from that way on.
Yeah.
Because I read in your paper, you were saying that when you were in the room doing the counselling, you would get buzzed a lot because you weren't focusing so much on problem or the problem that the client was bringing to the room. You seem to have, and even when they brought in the brief, the computer model, and reading in your paper, it's felt like we can't put people into a computer program and expect, the same result every time. So were you a rebel, Eve? Were you a bit of a rebel? Was it about emotions? Because I know you talk a lot about emotions in your paper, but when we were taught, it was like emotions obviously are important, but it was the outward expression of that emotion. How do you see what? So in terms of the rest of the team, you seem to be going
the most emotional one. Are you saying?
Yeah. or understanding that they were important.
Personality-wise, yes. Yes, actually, but I had a psychodynamic background. My play therapy studies, my 4 years in play therapy were psychoanalytic, but I got really discouraged with psychoanalytic thinking And while I was taking my master's degree in Rochester, Lyman Wynn was head of the psychiatry department there. And my supervisor sent me over to the hospital to take the courses that Lyman Wynn was giving in family therapy. And that changed my thinking completely. However, I guess it never changed my thinking about the fact that people come into therapy feeling pain, emotional pain of some kind, and how can I help them? Regardless of what method I'm trying to, I practice. So.
Emma, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do have a question actually. When I read your paper, and I'm currently reading your book, I really loved the bit when you talked about the importance of us being humans first and therapists second. And so my question is, for those people who are teaching other people the approach or talking about it, how do we make sure that we aren't creating people who are just going to focus on the techniques? And how do we help them remember the importance of just relating to other people and caring and empathy and all that stuff, so it doesn't just become, just give me a list of questions to ask?
Yeah, well, that's of course was one of my chores at the beginning when I thought, I mean, one of my problems, because from the start, the techniques were so inviting, and they're so, especially for students, it's something that you can write on the back of your hand, and you feel safe when you go into sessions. And in terms of teaching, what I used to do is after the first session of seeing how they respond, I would ask them to forget the techniques, and in the next session, just to talk with the clients and try to find out about them, what they like to do, what they do for work, and to just connect with them in some way. And then I would gradually introduce the techniques. You have to remember, way back at the beginning, the techniques develop slowly. It isn't like today that when someone comes to learn solution-focused therapy, they've read all these papers, they know all these techniques, and our students were introduced to techniques gradually. But once the techniques were in place, this is what I would do, because it's just very, very, of course, it's a tremendous thing. It's a wonderful thing to hang on to, these techniques at the beginning, but it's not going to have people come back. No, it's not going to have them engage in therapy. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. And I think when I read your case studies in your book, the impression I get, which could be wrong, is that you use the techniques support your conversations rather than dominate the conversations.
Right. Yes. And I believe that's a matter of style. And I think people have to develop their own style, no matter what they're doing, no matter what method they're teaching. So I don't think there's any particular law about what to do. I find, for instance, nowadays, I believe that people open sessions, the preferable way to open the session is, what is your preferred future? Fine, good question. But so is, how will you know you won't have to come back here anymore? Or similar questions like that. I guess orthodoxy is not something that I enjoyed in therapy, and therefore that's what made me write my book.
But I think also, Eve, you've emphasized that solution-focused therapy, going along with you're saying, it's not the technique so much, but it's sort of a worldview. It's a way of thinking, sort of a value system and a philosophy.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I do believe that. Well, let me say this. I think the assumptions are a worldview. Nothing is all negative. All those assumptions are a worldview that guide the therapy, but guide our lives. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that. Yeah. I don't know. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Seems like, I mean, I've read some of your stuff as well. It seemed like I saw that in some of your writings, or you commented on that as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think about this goes back to brief family therapy, that emotional climate of the fact that we adapt ourselves to the person who's come for therapy. We want, if possible, to speak their language. If they're an artist, it being a different language than if they're a accountant.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that a lot of what I read currently is more in the sense of do away with all that. If it works, fine. And I know that solution-focused thinking is used in many different areas that don't have 1 hour sessions. You know, they're not therapy. So you can't translate a lot of what I'm saying to every situation. However, working with people is working with people no matter what you're doing. It doesn't have to be professional. So, and those ideas that are in the book, and they work for everything, you know. And for example, the dual track thinking. Well, as a therapist, yes, you think as you're talking, you're also monitoring yourself and going, I'm really getting annoyed with this person and so forth, whatever. But doesn't that work in real life too?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe I just translated life to therapy in my own particular style, and didn't reduce it in any way. I don't know. But don't we all have to be ourselves as therapists, really? So.
Yeah. And I think the research supports that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Research, of course, supports the fact too that the relationship with your client is what makes success. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you also probably you were the first one to start using solution-focused therapy in domestic violence situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your early experiences with doing that?
Oh, well, early on at Brief Family Therapy Center, while Insu was still at Family Service, she was a consultant to a women's shelter. And when she got too busy, and I left the program and I went over to the Brief Family Therapy Center, she said, why don't you go and consult to the Women's Center? I don't have time anymore. So I did. And that began 20 years of very interesting associations and work. And I then ended up working for 2 shelters. But what I came away with was that the first thing is that I had to fight the system, because the system, which wasn't that old at the time, I think the first women's shelter was developed in Great Britain in the late 70s. Is that, if any of you know that? It's something like that. It's really amazingly late. It's no sooner, I know it was 70s sometime. So what I discovered talking with the women and attending some of the men's sessions, the men's groups and so forth, I began to realize that spouse abuse is on a continuum. You know, there are couples that have a relationship, they care for each other, they have a connection with each other and empathy for each other, but they don't know how to get along. And then gradually it gets more and more, the personality differences diverge more and more until you get into the personality disordered men and sociopathic ones and so forth. So we have this continuum. In the United States, at least, all the legal, all the judicial connections to that field come from one perspective. The woman is innocent, the man is guilty, they must separate. And my goal, and that of a couple of people who worked with me, including a man who's no longer with us, who worked in a shelter and was in charge of men's groups, including him, we all felt that to separate people automatically whenever there is any conflict that calls for where there's attention being drawn but to the police or something, to immediately separate the family has many there are many deficits to that. Income, children, family, that's not necessarily the answer. So we began to ask the police to send us these couples. And we began to work with them quite successfully, many of them, and some of course not. And this led me personally to want to develop an assessment tool to determine at what point is it safe, at what point isn't it to work. It never worked. Over the years, I made contact with a lot of academicians at universities who were, I'm not a researcher, I don't have a PhD, and I'm not a research person, but I connected with people who were working on that. It's never been done. And I don't know if it's because of the judicial intervention that prevents it. It's really a shame to this day because a lot of it's one of the things that I regret in my career. I really would have liked to have made a difference there. I think we made a difference with the couples we saved. In fact, I remember occasionally going into a store here at Rochester and having someone say to me, "Oh, you know, you saved my husband, my marriage," and things like that. And I remembered it was where they pushed and shoved each other type of case. But there's so much that could be done in that area, and solution-focused therapy was a very good method to use, but you had to do you had to know how to do a good assessment. Does this couple really have a relationship, or are they just dependent on each other, emotionally dependent without being able to give and take? You really needed it was very interesting work. Yeah.
And then, Eve, you, after 10 years in Brief Family Therapy Center in Milwaukee, you went out on your own, the ICF, was it ICF Consultants?
That's for individuals, couples, and families.
I wondered what the ICF, brilliant, thank you. So what led to that decision? Because, I mean, obviously it was a good one for you, but was it a difficult one at the time to make?
Yes, very much so. Stephen Insu and I were alone at that point. Everybody had left. It was just the three of us. Insu and Steve was traveling more and more. I still had one of our children at home, and they wanted me to be, to become the administrator of the office, and I really didn't want to do that. I also wanted to cut back, and I think they never believed me that was my reason. I don't know what they believed. Unfortunately, they never gave me a chance to explain it. I really didn't want to leave them personally, or this wonderful place and what it had done for me, but I needed also to. I was so much Insu and Steve's appendage. I felt like Insu and Steve's appendage. I had written, I had done some presenting, but I think I needed to be my own person. And also I needed to work less. And so by chance, one of the women, Marilyn Bonjean, who had a private practice there, needed to leave where she was and was thinking of private practice. So we decided to open an office together. And that's the whole truth of it. But unfortunately, it hurt their feelings, and they couldn't believe that that was really the truth. It was, and it is. And they never forgave me. Stephen Insu never entered our office, regardless of how often they were invited to events or something. Steve was a little more forgiving than Insu, because in later years we would talk. Or so yeah, that's why I left. And ICF, again, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, grew so quickly that it wasn't exactly that I stepped back and had less to do. But I had becoming the administrator of the office, running all of BFDC was just more than I was doing when I was at ICF. And I couldn't handle that. That was too much. It was my family.
Emma, do you want to jump in?
No, I have got one question, but I'll save it till later because I noticed that there's a couple of questions popped up.
It's all right. Go on. We can do them in a minute.
It's a bit of a weird question. Quite weird, actually. So it's about the miracle question. I read an article a couple of years ago by Dwayne Bidwell, and what I took from his article was the power of the moment, I guess, when someone first realizes that things can be different, or that there is a way of getting unstuck, or whatever it is. When they very first get that hope, I suppose, that there is possibility of life getting better for them. And in that article, when I was reading it, I remember thinking, do we move people too quickly to what will you be doing? What will people notice? And given that you're very focused on emotions and connecting with people, do you think we're robbing people of that moment by moving too quickly into the observational stuff?
Well, it depends on how quickly you move. If somebody comes in and it's what's your hoped for future, and you go right into, I really don't know how to answer that, because from the way I think, it depends on the person who comes in for therapy. There will be one person who absolutely appreciates the straightforward to the solution and approach. And I've had many, many people, because I mean, it's not like, in my last years of practice, I didn't spend half a session talking to people about general things unless they led me to they gave me the message that I don't want to talk about, I don't want to answer your question, that I want to tell you my story. And when that happened, I would let them tell their story. And if necessary, for the entire session, and I would every 10 minutes or so, I would attempt very gradually to say, so if that weren't to happen anymore, what would it? and then they'd go right back to telling their story. Then I'd let them tell their story, and then they'd make another session. And 9 times out of 10, at the beginning of the next session, they were willing to start working. Many people just feel they have to tell you their story. And what will they think of? Will they come back if you don't let them?
It's true.
The whole objective of our work is that people come back and feel comfortable and move forward and find strength in themselves. And different people do that in different ways. I think that's my problem with some of the reading I do, where things are so abbreviated and so fast-tracked, that I say, it's good if it works, but that's not going to work for everybody. So you have to teach people, how do you gauge what speed to use with the particular person who comes in next hour and the hour after? How do you individualize all this?
It may seem obvious to some people, not to others, but while people are telling their story, then what are you doing? How are you responding to them during those 10-minute intervals?
Okay. No, that must be hard and so forth. That's the usual empathic things, but I may ask questions.
Okay.
No, and those may be history questions. How long has this been going on? Or, anybody else in your family have that issue? Yeah, I mean.
So you're having a conversation with them, but.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was there was in the paper that I was talking about earlier, Eve, when you went to ICF, you did kind of an experiment with the predictions of what the therapists thought and what the clients were saying, and that was quite an eye-opener for you, wasn't it?
Oh yes, we really felt that what we said at the end of the session made a big difference. yes.
Mm.
Well, what made the difference was the relationship. It was a real eye opener. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because none of the predictions actually were what they thought they were going to be.
No,
So,
well, I remember situations where we said, well, that obviously the client really reacted to that. That is going to make a difference when they come back. They didn't even remember these things.
mm,
We remember.
There have been a number of other studies like that done and published, regardless of theoretical approach used, and that's the same findings they have. It's the relationship. They never mention clients don't mention techniques. It's always the relationship.
yeah.
So, I mean, what does that leave us with? That basically all types of therapy will work depending on how the client feels about the relationship they're having with that particular therapist. And now, personally, I don't feel very kindly toward therapies where people come in, tell their stories, leave, feel better, and come back and tell their story, the next phase of their story, where there is no structure and plan. There's no, I don't know whether you have that, if you see that in your practices, but among the students I've taught, among the clients I've seen, there are so many that have been taught, the students have been taught not to have a sense of momentum. And how do you know that things are working? How do you know the client is better other than they're saying, yes, I'm better, and then I know this because when I was training for my master's degree in Rochester, I didn't have a structure. I didn't know why I was talking with people, except that I wanted to be a nice person and listen to them. And then when I began to study family therapy, and I realized there's a structure to things, I began to go, yeah, well, you have an obligation here other than to be nice and to talk to somebody. And it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm expressing myself clearly about what I'm trying to say, that no matter what therapy you practice, you have to have a theory. You have something to hang. I call it a framework to hang your work on. And solution-focused therapy is a framework. It's not a bunch of techniques, in my opinion. And I know Steve always said there's no such thing as theory, but I'm sorry, I don't buy it. There are theoretical constructs, there are underpinnings, theoretical underpinnings. If you want to call them assumptions, I don't know what you want to call them, but it's not just a Wittgenstein momentary interaction verbally. It's more than that, if you're going to help people. And I'm sure all of you feel that way.
Yeah, and the meta-analysis supports that of different approaches, that all coherent approaches are effective. What really accounts for change are the common factors.
Yes.
But that the theoretical approaches are the delivery mechanisms for the common factors. So I think the meta-analysis of therapy outcomes support the point you're making.
Yes, definitely.
Joe, do you want to read out the couple of questions that we had sent in beforehand?
Yes, we've got a question from Keiko. What are your thoughts, Eve, on all the different new developments and the evolution of solution focus since Milwaukee?
What am I?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on all the different applications of the solution focused approach and how it's developed and grown so big since Milwaukee?
Well, I don't see that it's changed that much. I know there are different, I think the language has changed, but I don't think the basic theoretical process the basic theoretical underpinnings have been lost or changed. Yeah, I was thinking about this today in preparation for this talk and conversation, and I thought, Freud had disciples, so to speak, and they had different ways of dealing with what he had developed, however, they all dealt with the unconscious. It was just different ways of dealing with the unconscious. And I was thinking that, well, solution-focused therapy is solution-focused therapy. It has its techniques, it has its philosophy in terms of working forward, building on people's strengths and so forth. And what's happened over the years is that people, they try to build on it. They make it shorter, they make it longer, they change the language. They talk about different rooms that people move from in their process of building solutions. They talk about different platforms they read. But the basic theory still guides the process. Would you say you agree or disagree? I'd love to hear some disagreement about that.
Anyone, if you dare.
I dare not. I think.
Emma's like, no, we're good.
I think you're right, Eve. I think what we've seen, because it's come out of the arena of family therapy and it's gone into business coaching. It's gone into so many different areas, and I think what you're saying, the underpinnings are still the same, but it seems to be. It can be universally. It just doesn't belong in. You can move it outside of that family therapy into other areas that as just as successful, I suppose. I think that's. I don't know if you think that was a great success of what you guys developed, but it's gone out of that family arena now into all different areas. It's amazing.
Right. Yes, very successful. Because I don't think the basic idea that you can build on strengths and build on previous, strengths being previous experience, positive experience, I don't think that was thought of in many ways in business dealings with people, in teaching. So that's translated very well to many fields.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we've got a question from Guy Shannon. So of all the new ideas and practices that you have developed at Milwaukee, what has had the most lasting influence on how you work right up to this moment, up to today?
That's specific to what we developed at the BFTC. Okay, I think the answer is that being where the client is, listening very carefully, and one of the things that I really believe in is clarifying and clarifying and clarifying, which is not necessarily a solution-focused technique, but when it's a technique to be where the client is, to be with the client and build on the client's, what the client tells us, to be there and not to impose our own thinking in any way, to help them draw out of them what their strengths are, what their goals are, and to be supportive of that as much as possible. And when I still do some consulting, and that's also a really important thing when you see people stuck in a case. They're stuck because they're stuck in their own thinking, and they're not where the client is. Their clients are.
Mhm.
And just at the end, Guy said, an appreciation from all solution practitioners that we owe you so much. That was kind of the end bit of that. More of a comment than part of the question.
Thank you so much, but I can't take credit for that by myself. I mean, there were 5 of us, and solution-focused therapy wouldn't ever have come about if those 5 people hadn't worked together so closely and respected each other's opinions. And yeah, it wasn't, I mean, Steve wrote the first books, but those books, he was the writer, but what we would be doing would be sitting every day after every case. Some days early on, we only had 1 case, but even later, when we had more, we would sit and we'd either look at a tape or we would talk about the case. And there was so much discussion about the various aspects of it, and very much everybody's opinion really counted a lot, which was very important. The process couldn't have built without mutual respect. Unfortunately later, but it wasn't necessary anymore. Later, when things took off and everybody started to go around teaching and so forth, that beautiful process was no longer possible. But I think that's probably a developmental thing anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Emma, we have a question from Emma Gillibrand. Would you like to read it, if you can?
Okay, luckily I saw it as it popped up. What advice would you have for people who are at the very beginning of their journey using the solution-focused approach? What would be your words of wisdom to them?
Using it or teaching it?
As a therapist.
As a therapist.
Using, yeah.
Go slow. Don't expect things to work too fast. Just as we tell our clients, progress is slow if it's going to last and work. I think beginning therapists also have to permit themselves to go slowly and not expect too much of themselves. Because if they do, they're firing away with techniques. That doesn't work. Early on, I said, what I would do with students is tell them just start talking with the clients, because it relaxes them and they don't have to worry about, am I using the techniques right? They don't focus on the techniques. Well, the same goes for the beginning therapist, I think, not to worry about whether they're really doing solution-focused therapy right away, but rather to meet the client, feel some sort of a connection with the client, try to understand what the client's preferred future or goals or whatever you want to call it are, and to take it slowly. And one of the things I always say is clarify, clarify, clarify. I've said it before. I think it's very good for beginning therapists too. When you clarify, when you say to clients, do you mean this or that? When you say that, it helps them. It's a tremendous technique for clarifying your own thoughts, but it helps both the client and the therapist. So that's something that it's not usually mentioned, but I have found it an invaluable thing to do.
Eve, where were you in 2014? I needed that advice in 2014, but actually as you're talking and I'm typing, doing the admin behind the scenes, which Joe thinks I'm just playing a game, I'm thinking, God,
Eve,
that's so
Eve was
true.
writing this paper in 2014.
She was writing it for me, specifically for me.
Too busy writing.
But I'm just resonating and thinking, God, I just needed to hear that. I really needed to hear what you've just said, because it took me a few years to understand that. And I only came to that realization once we had our own members of staff, and I could see that they were just following the process and copying the way that we were delivering. And I had to explain, everyone has their own personality, and it's important to be yourself and be comfortable with yourself, but not to be so black and white and scripted with it. Go with the client, just be led by the client. So had you have told me that in 2014, my practice would have been a lot better. So I apologize to all the service users I met between 2014 and 2016.
I wish I could have been there. I do wish I did. Listen, I had to learn this too. I mean, I learned it a long time ago, but it was, we all have to learn that, yes.
Our beautiful, lovely colleague, Jason, has asked a question. He's asked, did you ever think that Solution Focus and what you've co-founded would ever have been as big as it is now?
Never. We would, we would have these conversations when at the very beginning, well, do you think anybody's going to want to read? Well, I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you an interesting story. There was one day at the Brief Family Therapy Center early on, it must have been, I don't know, maybe 81, 82, something like that. We got an invitation to a meeting in Connecticut where it was a weekend meeting in a sort of a mansion, and the biggest people in the family therapy world were going to be there, about 30 people, all the big names, and we couldn't figure out in any way how come we even got the invitation. And we would sit there and say, well, how can we go? Nobody knows us. How come we got this? I mean, how are we going to interact with all these famous family therapists? And because the five of us were close and supportive of each other, we decided to go and brave it. And you had to bring some videotapes of your work. And of course, so Steve brought some tapes, and we came to this meeting, and nobody knew us really, and they'd say, "Where are you from? What is your name?" And so we clung together. But dinner was always everybody in a big dining room of this. I mean, big. There weren't that many people, but there was wine and food, and it was nice. And afterwards dinner, people would watch tapes. Lyman Wynn. I don't know. Do you all know who Lyman Wynn is? Yes.
I'm the old guy here.
Well, he was sort of a father of the family therapy field and very influential. And so Lyman was there, and then it came to our turn to show a videotape. And Steve was the one to do that, and he did it. And Steve was he pretended to be a little drunk, because that way he wouldn't be responsible for whatever he said. It was very funny. Because if people ask questions that, I mean, what's going on here? They hadn't seen anything like that. It seemed odd. And so his being so is a little bit inebriated would probably take him off the hook if people disagreed with, thought it was all very stupid. And P.S. Lyman Wynn looked at this tape and he got blown away. And he met with Stephen Insu the next day and then with us. And he hightailed it to Milwaukee to come and visit with us. He happened to have a daughter in Milwaukee too, but he came very quickly. And he was one of our biggest promoters and a great fan of ours and a wonderful man. And but we really didn't think we would ever world famous. I mean, that really, that was never in the picture, you know, never.
Well, Eve, you said how the development of solution-focused therapy really came out of the five of you working together. No one takes more credit than anybody else. But then you were the first one that I know of that wrote about solution-focused therapy being supported by neuroscience. Neuroscience.
Yes, right.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to that? Because I was blown away when I think it was 2004 when you first wrote an article about that and edited a special issue of Journal of Systemic Therapies about that.
Yeah, right. I came about it through developing my theory, which is in my book, where I talk about Maturana and the biological aspects of emotion. And that made me think that we need to go in this direction. We need to think and learn more about cognition and emotion and the brain. Unfortunately, I didn't pursue it enough. I got busy and it required extremely difficult studies that I wasn't able to do at the time. But I really felt that was a direction that could open up new things for all of us, particularly because of solution-focused thinking and how the supporting of the amygdala, the system in the brain that deals with emotion, how that could be utilized therapeutically. what I needed was to be at a university and have some support from other departments who were specialized in things like that, and so we could collaborate. But unfortunately, I was in private practice my whole life and not associated with the university, but that would have been very helpful.
Mhm.
Maybe I think Rachel might be listening. Rachel Gillibrand has
Yes.
done some work on this, Eve, where she has
Those things.
studied those things that they put on your head, and they studied the blood flow and the electrical activity in the
She
brain.
refers to it as the kit, a kit.
The kit,
Yes.
when they're asking,
EEG kit, I think.
yeah, when they're asking solution-focused questions and how
Right.
different parts of the brain light up, and the creative side of the brain kicks in. So that's we will get Rachel to send you her research. I think it might.
She's just sent me a text message to say EEG.
EEG. Sorry, Rachel.
EEG. Yeah.
Dr. Rachel Gillibrand is not impressed with you, Mr. Lettieri.
Yeah, but you can send it over to Eve. I'm sure it'll be really fascinating.
One of the questions I would like to ask is whether you have published about your family therapy using solution-focused therapy, because I would love to read something about that.
I think that's a question for you, Ash. Don't sit there all like, oh, I'm gonna pass this over.
No.
Gil keeps on at us about that as well.
I keep on nagging them about that a little bit, in a kind sort of way.
Mm.
Well,
They're doing some great stuff, Eve. They really
that's what
are.
I believe. I just from the little research I've done, I really, really think what you're doing is important because family therapy is I want to say a dying field. I think it's dead. It's almost dead. So for someone to do solution-focused family therapy, I would just love to know more about it, and I'd love to read about it, and people should read about it. Everybody who's doing solution-focused therapy should read about that.
I think we've got no
Ash,
choice.
I think the
now,
answer is
Ash.
not yet.
Well, yeah, I mean,
You're right, Emma.
I mean,
Not yet.
we haven't written anything yet. However, and Emma knows this person. We actually have a parent a service user, a wonderful parent who we admire and respect, and she's a huge inspiration to us. And she's come such a long way. And with that, we've been training. We train all the parents how to use solution-focused therapy. So it's not just therapy directed to them; it's we train them how to use it, which is really important. And this parent has created an amazing blog about hope and her miracle day and what she's working towards. And she's absolutely fantastic. So that at the moment is the closest we'll get to the, but you know, I am very, very proud of this person. I think most solution-focused therapists who have seen her work are, but maybe one day. I think at the moment, Eve, we are so busy. We have the child to parent abuse. We have our participants. So our participants program starting, you know, domestic abuse recovery. There's so much going on, but I'm hoping that Gil will just interview us and just write it for us. I mean, would that be such a bad thing, Gil?
No, not at all. But now we don't want to leave Emma out of this because she's doing some great stuff in New Zealand.
Emma's brilliant. Emma, please tell us what you do, because you know that you are like our mentor as well. We do come to you when we need advice, and that's the beauty of the solution-focused world. We are a lovely, lovely community. Emma, who are you? What do you do?
I talk to people, really. So I work in family harm with police, and probably the most interesting thing I do is talking to people in the police cells in the custody area. So I just love it. It's the best thing I've ever done, getting alongside those people who are locked up and in a really bad space and often don't have anyone think of even talking to them. And so the conversations I've been privileged enough to have with those guys has just been unbelievably meaningful, and yeah, can't speak enough about it. It's just that getting to know them as people and what their hopes and dreams are, not what they've done or what they're in there for, but how they want their life to be and how they think they might get there. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah, we love Emma.
So Eve, I have one last question, since we're talking about writing, is you've been a very productive writer, contributing on your own, together with others, but on your own, and some really good stuff over the years. So my question is, how have you made time to do that, despite all your other demands on your time? I mean, that'd be good advice to, well, to all of us sitting here, as well as anybody else who might watch this later on.
That's a good question, because now that I am of advanced years, to put it mildly, one of my big tasks is to learn to slow down. And the reason I've been able to be productive is because I've been so energetic, and you know, I always found time to do it all, and I had sort of an obsession about I have to do it all, and that doesn't sit too well. Gil, you may need this advice eventually, but it helps to slow down as one ages.
Well, I will, when the time comes, I will heed that advice.
Okay.
Well, I needed her advice in 2014. I mean, come on. Jonas Wells has a question which may have been slightly answered before, but we love Jonas and we can't exclude him. What motivated you even before BFTC to undertake the journey to explore what became Solution Focus? Why did you invest your time and energy into it?
Before it became BFTC?
Yes, before it came BFTC.
What motivated me? Well, as I told you, I took this job because my youngest went to kindergarten and I didn't know what to do with myself.
I love that.
My neighbor was in this mental health project in Rochester, New York, and I started reluctantly to get trained there to be a paraprofessional working with children in play therapy, psychoanalytically. And this process turned me on. And I wanted to learn more and to do more. And I think that really was it.
I think you're amazing. And can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Other than where were you in 2014, which I'm not going to let go of now because that would have saved me a couple of years.
I think, where was I?
Well, you weren't near me. I mean, emails, thank you to Brian, by the way, Eve's son, who, thank you so much for putting in touch with your mum. And I don't know if he showed you the message, but I did say, if your mum says no, you insist, you don't give up. Thank you to Brian. But also, we've been emailing back and forth, and what I noticed that you're still actually a therapist you're still delivering, you're still working with people. How is it that you're supporting people at the moment in your community where you're living?
In my community, there was I live in a wonderful community, which is culturally very active, other than during a pandemic. But one of the vice presidents, if there had been mental health issues, one of the vice presidents kind of referred it out to some therapist or something. There wasn't a department, or there wasn't a resident committee to handle emotional support for residents. There are wonderful other resident committee for everything else. And so we moved, my husband and I moved here 4 years ago, next week. And I hadn't been very active the first 2 years. I needed to acclimate living in a community. It's not something that my husband and I were used to. So I eased in gradually. And when they wanted to have this committee on emotional support, they said, would I do it? And I really hesitated a long time because I just wasn't sure. And now I'm involved in it. I finally accepted it, thinking, well, it's not forever. I can try it for a year or two. And it's kind of interesting because what we're developing, there's a great need among old people who are isolated and lonely for support systems. So that's what I'm working on, building a support system here for that purpose.
Wow. Joe, that's where you'll be going soon.
Yes.
Eve is going to build it up for you.
Sooner than I think.
And then you can enjoy that. We have actually come to the end, and we don't want to keep you any longer, Eve, but any last questions or comments for Eve, guys?
I couldn't wait for this night. I knew it was going to be special, and it has been. And what I would take away from it is what I always thought at the beginning, that people are individuals and we need to go at their pace, regardless of technique. Let's be led by the client. And you've just highlighted that for me, Eve. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you all. It's been absolutely lovely. I can't believe an hour and a half has passed.
I know.
Sorry about my computer illiteracy, but
It's fine.
I hope
This has just been a real treat to have this conversation with you and to benefit from your wisdom as well as your knowledge about solution-focused therapy and the development of it. It's just been invaluable. Thank you.
It's lovely meeting you. It's lovely meeting all of you, really. I wish we could meet
you so
much and we could talk. And I haven't been to New Zealand, but I spent 2 months in Australia teaching once, so that was nice. But lovely meeting you, and good luck.
So it's been amazing.
Let me know if you write something, please.
I'll tell you what, Eve, just for you.
We're going to have to do it. We're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Write it and dedicate it to Eve.
Yes. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant idea. Yeah.
Maybe Eve will write an introduction to your book.
There's so much. There's a lot of pressure on.
God, Gil, what you doing? God, we're writing projects, we're writing this, but it's got Joe. Cancel everything, Joseph.
Yes, cancel everything for the next few months.
Where's Dev? Is admin watching? Is admin cancel everything? Sorry, Emma, did you want to say, because I don't think we could hear you.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving up your time, and to Joe and Aish, thank you so much for all of these chats that you do, but for letting me be part of it. It's just overwhelmingly awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you.
And all of you stay healthy, please.
Yeah, you too.
And I just want to say, some of you may have read it on Facebook today, but a parent actually sent me a private message yesterday to say that thanks to the FBS chats, so thank you to all the solution-focused therapists that have joined us, that her daughter is now less anxious and she's more hopeful. She hadn't actually left her bedroom in a couple of years, and she overheard an FBS chat. It was actually with Rachel Gillibrand that she overheard it. And then since then, she's been watching FBS chats religiously, never misses one. And she's now leaving her bedroom. She's eating better, and she's spending time with her mum and her dad, and she's not anxious anymore. And thank you so much. These are what FBS Chat's about. So thank you to every single person that has supported FBS Chat, and co-hosts. We love you all.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Can I just ask Eve, Joe, Gil, and Emma not to press any buttons? We're just going to say goodbye to everybody else, but we're going to have a private conversation afterwards. Very exclusive, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Behind the scenes. You just stay there, Eve. Don't touch anything. Don't leave.
Don't leave.
We're not leaving. We're not leaving. Don't leave.
Oh, okay.
We're just going off the air.
We're just coming off the air. That's it, because we want to say a personal thank you to you.
Oh, okay.
Everybody else, we'll see you next week.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Is that it? Oh.